All right, welcome into Madness here on the College Basketball Tip-Off Show, powered by WagerTalk.com. The Monday after Selection Sunday. They call it Madness for a reason, and we are certainly off and running with the madness. A lot to digest from over the last 24 hours, and we've got two of the best here at Wager Talk with college hoops to kind of navigate our way through what we just learned here 24 hours ago and what we're planning on seeing here coming up in I don't know, about 48 hours or so. We got playing games, we got seating, we've got brackets, we've got initial thoughts on games, we got a little something for everyone here today. So, gentlemen, Adam Trigger in the house as well as Drew Martin. Trig, we'll start where we usually do. Always something we can pull away on from a weekend of conference tournaments and crowning champions here. Some people think it's a good thing. Some people think, hey, not exactly a bad thing if maybe one of these higher seeds got their asses bounced out earlier. Gives them a couple of opportunities maybe to work on some things and give them a little rest. What did you take away from this weekend as we head into the March Madness brackets?
Joe, it's probably more from this weekend over the course of like many years than it is from this weekend specifically, but pretty much throughout the conference tournaments. I really feel like this is the best way to approach it. Like, just because a team got hot in their conference tournament does not mean they're going to come in and play that way in the NCAA tournament. Just because a team didn't give a shit and got bounced in the first round does not mean that they're going to come out and struggle in the NCAA tournament. There's, anecdotal evidence of both happening. Like, everyone remembered the Kemba Walker run for years when, of course, UConn played their way from not even being into the tournament to winning a national title. But that same thing has happened in past years. I think it was a couple of years ago, maybe Seton Hall, won the Big East tournament, bounced in the first round. I don't think there's really, it's all a case by case basis, right? It's team by team. So I really try to take sort of like where I have a team over the course of like the whole season and look at the big picture and put as little stock in the last weekend as, like, yes, you have to like weigh it in just like you'd weigh in any other game. But just because a team kind of had a good conference tournament doesn't make me more or less inclined to look at them for an NCAA tournament game.
Yeah, Drew, recency bias is a real thing. And a lot of people are going to watch what teams like, North Carolina State did. And, they're going to look at some of these Darkhorse teams that ran the gamut and won their conference and maybe put a little too much emphasis on that, which will be great because if you take a step back, it might offer some quality betting opportunities here early on Thursday and Friday.
Sure, Joe. I mean, you're recency biased. I agree with you, and I almost pumped the brakes personally on doing that. And I do agree with what Trig said. In terms of the conference tournaments, it's almost like some of these, they're not even rewarding the teams that are winning their conferences that much. I mean, I'll just talk about my alma mater, Auburn. Getting the 4 seed and in the same region as UConn. I don't know that that's really a plus for winning the SEC tournament. So we're kind of seeing it year in, year out, and Trig alluded to that. I will say this, Joe, something that I've learned, and this is kind of trickling over year to year, is they're kind of rewarding, or I don't know if reward is the right word, but I guess giving the benefit of the doubt to the bigger schools in the Power 5. And it's something that I don't think there's any stopping it. It's like a snowball rolling down the mountain. And we've even seen like the lesser tournaments, like the NIT, they're doing away with, the conference winners of the regular season that did not win their tournament, getting the automatic bid. They're adding more Power 5 teams to the NIT. So I think this is something, hey, get all the money you can, I guess. There's no stopping that, Joe, but we're going to continue to see kind of the bigger schools get the benefit of the doubt on Selection Sunday.
Yeah, no, and there certainly are. I mean, no surprises from what we saw with the 1 seeds, Trig, right? Pretty much the only big question was, North Carolina losing. Would Tennessee keep it? Would Iowa State jump up maybe to a 1 seed? But ultimately, it didn't happen. North Carolina got that 4th 1 seed. I didn't think Iowa State, with that ridiculous strength of schedule at a conference, which was in the 300s, was going to be a 1 seed. But nothing else shocked you really as far as the top of the board goes?
No, I mean, I kind of felt like the top few seeds were at least what I thought they would be. Like Joe, I really don't put up like a ton of stock into the bracket. I look at the actual bracket and the actual seeds, very minimal. I typically watch the selection show, and it's kind of like one of the last times I look at the bracket for the rest of the time. So for me, like, nothing like I suppose stood out as like something I could make an actionable sort of move against. So it was just it's all kind of whatever for me. I'm far more interested in the matchups and like trying to make money than I am like who's seated where.
So we know the number 1 seeds. They all get a different part of the country to go into here, Drew. Just by looking at this, was there one that may have a little easier path as you play it out in your head across? I know a lot of people think Purdue got the easiest spot of them all there of the 4 number 1s here. Was there one side of the bracket with these 1 seeds you think kind of earned themselves maybe, hell, a pretty easy trip at least to the Elite 8?
Yeah, Joe, I agree with you on the Midwest. Purdue, Utah State, TCU, obviously good teams there in the 8-9, but I think Purdue getting to the second weekend is probably as likely as any, maybe outside of UConn. But then I think the reason the Midwest is an easier side is because going there, forward. Yes, Tennessee is in this region as the 2 seed, Creighton as well, but I agree with you. I think Purdue in the Midwest probably has the easiest route. And then UNC in the West, I don't think it's nearly as difficult as actually the East. In the number 1 overall seed in UConn, I actually think the committee made them possibly have the hardest route. I know that sounds crazy, the number 1 overall seed, but I brought up Auburn in the 4. That's going to be what a possible Sweet 16 matchup against the SEC, tournament champion. That seems a little bit wild. And then you talk about Iowa State not getting a 1 seed, but still they were in the conversation, and that's the 2 seed in the East. So I think UConn, as surprising as it is, has probably the most difficult route out of all the 1 seeds. And FAU Northwestern, in the round of 32, that's playing the Owls. Remember their run last year, Joe, in South Florida. So, and I brought up Creighton as a 3 seed. How about, a surprise? Like, yes, Trig, only 3 Big East teams get the nod into the tournament. That was surprising to me, Joe.
How many Patinos can actually get in, Trig? I mean, how many Patinos?
I'll jump in here quick because I agree with like UConn having a tough path. But if I was going to pick one of these teams to like buy in with and win their region, it's probably still UConn. Like they're, in my opinion, they're the best team I've seen play all season. I got to see, a whole bunch of different teams play in different venues in addition to watching a million games on television. And it's like the most convincing team is still UConn to me now. Yeah. Like, are they going to have to beat good teams to get there? Of course. But I've yet to see a more convincing basketball team. Like I saw Houston. So just to put it into context, I saw Houston play a couple weeks or a week prior to UConn. They beat Baylor in the game I went to. I still think UConn, again, we're talking like eye test, some other factors. I still thought UConn was significantly better. And then, you talk about like what UConn did in the Big East tournament, and maybe you have to downgrade that because some of those teams didn't get in. But I mean, they were kind of dominant there. They have guys coming off their bench, Joe, that I think would start for most other teams. Like you talk about a freshman like Jalen Stewart playing 10 minutes a game, doing things in the Big East tournament that I don't think most team starters are capable of doing. Like, it's stuff like that. And it's the fact that, like, I tend to fade like the chalkiness, but when was the last time we had a repeat winner? Mid 2000s? Was it Florida in the mid 2000s? So we're kind of due. I think the last time maybe a number one overall seed is won has been almost a decade. Again, I'm going off memory with some of these things, but I think it's been a while since the number one overall seed is won. For me, like, I still would take UConn over any of the one seeds. I don't care what the path is, because, again, teams get hot. It's all about matchups. That's why I don't care for the brackets as much, because everything's contingent upon the matchup that you end up getting. So if I was going to buy in with a one seed to win their region, I would be trying to buy the very best team. And I think that team is UConn. I still could see any of those other ones slipping up at some point in their respective sort of bracket.
Let me ask you, Trick, because you spent a lot of time out there with the Mountain West. They got a ton of teams in there. A couple of them, though, landing themselves in the play-in tournament here. But the play-in tournament also has a couple of teams from some conferences that you have gone to over the last couple of years here. Anything surprise you about who got in, who didn't get in from the Mountain West? And are you still of the belief that there's not a whole lot separating the top third from the bottom third here? I mean, most of those teams on even par, do you think?
Yeah, so I think the Mountain West played the game better than any other conference this year, Joe, meaning they scheduled well in the non-conference. They won a lot of the games that they needed to win against other conferences. And so they all kind of came. There was a group of teams from that league that came into conference play very highly rated. And then you get into the Mountain West play, winning on the road is extremely tough. So a lot of these teams beat up on each other. And, I think they did as good as they could have as a conference to get 6 teams in. Interestingly enough, and I had this conversation with someone earlier, like, take the top 7 from the ACC and the top 7 from the Mountain West. And some of these are going to pair up and play in the first round, which is why it's relevant. Like, a lot of people would just knee jerk and say, oh, the Mountain West is a better conference. The Mountain West has a better season. But, like, I mean, I'm still taking ACC's top 7 over the 6 teams that are in from the Mountain West plus UNLV, like, any day of the week. So I think I'm collectively going to look to fade the Mountain West. I don't know how many of these teams are around after the first weekend. Heck, we might not even have 2 of them around for the actual tournament, right? Because you have Colorado State and Boise in the first 4. Now, I'm not saying that's my opinion on those games, but the reality is, I mean, they're essentially 2 coin flips. You could be down to 4 Mountain West teams before the field of 64 even starts playing. I probably and this is a blanket statement here. I'm not saying I won't have a best bet on a Mountain West team against the number at some point. I think I'm going to sell this conference overall. I don't think I'm just going to be coming out firing, expecting like, okay, well, the Mountain West had a good season analytically, so they're just going to go into this tournament and do a bunch of damage, because I see sort of reasons to fade all 6 of those teams that are in the field.
I had a feeling that was the direction you might go with it here. I mean, it felt like the committee didn't know what to do with them, but like you said, they did just enough to be able to get into consideration and get themselves into games, but certainly no crazy seeding as far as that goes. A lot of tough roads there for the Mountain West. And Drew, your SEC, my goodness, they let them all in, man. You love your SEC here. Kind of feels like Auburn might get a whole lot of public love because of what we witnessed them do here along the way. Crowning themselves champs, beating Florida there yesterday in the SEC championship. But what do you think? I mean, who is the best of the best out of the SEC here, in your opinion? Is it Auburn? Is it Kentucky? Is it Tennessee? Who is it, in your opinion, Drew?
You know what, Joe? I think it's close. I don't think there's a whole lot of disparity between all the teams you just mentioned. I could see Tennessee making a run. At the same time, I could see Alabama, as much as it pains me to say, making a run. I do think Florida was a little bit, is going to be hampered a little bit due to injuries coming into the tournament. So I would pump the brakes a little bit with them. And then Auburn at the same time. this season with Auburn, Joe, I really haven't been betting them too much, unfortunately, at least recently. And they did show a little bit something there in the SEC tournament in terms of toughness. I really didn't think they were that tough of a team, but rebounding wise, they really kind of showed they were a lot better than I thought in the beginning of the season. Bruce Pearl has coached them up very well. And so we'll see if this continues. It goes back to Trig's point in the beginning of the show. Does it carry over from the conference tournament to the NCAA tournament? We're going to find out. I think some things translate. I don't know if all of it does. And also, what you were talking about with the Mountain West, Joe, we were kind of talking before the show started in terms of where I was leaning. And I thought Trig brought up a great point in terms of, yes, the Mountain West did get 6 teams in. However, 2 of them are playing in the play-in games. And I do have Colorado State circled as kind of looking to bet them against Virginia in Dayton, minus 2-point favorites. By the way, 120 is the total. Get ready for a defensive rock fight in this one. But one thing I do want to point out, Joe, is yes, I'm leaning towards Colorado State, but I'm not falling in love with this conference either, because yes, I think they are a very talented conference overall, the Mountain West, but are they getting too much love? I think it's something we can kind of carry over from these play-in games, how these Mountain West teams do, and translate that to the rest of the Mountain West teams playing in the first round, kind of similar to bowl season in college football. When the teams from the conference play in the early bowl games, it can translate to the other teams playing after them. And also, I want to point out, Joe, it is something that will be reflected in the marketplace. So don't wait around until like tip off of the games, because the market will move on what I'm saying.
Yeah, we had last year, Trig, we had or a couple of years ago, I think it was North Carolina, right? Made the run as a 9 seed, mostly because they underperformed all damn year and then finally put it together when it mattered the most. Is there a team that you think underperformed throughout the year that could be dangerous? Can't be as chalky as it seems, right? It never is. But is there a team that may have just not put it together during the season? A lot of people pointing to Texas. I don't see it with Texas, but a lot of people think maybe underperformed during the year, and Texas might be that North Carolina-esque style team that will put it together here during the tournament and make a run.
Well, I mean, selfishly, I guess I'll hope it's Michigan State, only because, like, if you talk about Michigan State, like, there's without a doubt they underperformed relative to like what they were supposed to be preseason. A lot of people had them. A lot of people, including myself, had them in like their top 10. I think I maybe even have said that they were like a top 5 team preseason. I know I came in one of my futures, which I'll pretty much, before we get off air here, I'll tell you what I have in the futures portfolio, which I'm really not in love with this year, but I'll still like read them off if you guys want them. Michigan State, I jumped in, I think like 50-1. And I thought like I was super smart in doing that back in December when they trashed Baylor by like 50 up at Little Caesars Arena in Detroit. And I think they're 100-1 now, Joe. So, that would sort of be like it just came to mind because you brought up 8-9. Obviously there's other places we could go with this. But, I mean, if they were a team, like, again, they never realized potential. I do think the Izzo and March argument is a tired one. Not the way I'm, like, trying to frame this, but they're in a winnable 8-9 game, right? Like, they win that game. They're playing North Carolina, a team that we've seen, I mean, they've slipped up in games. And that's I think, the story of that region in particular, because you've got North Carolina as the 1 and Arizona as the 2. And something those two teams share in common is they have bad days, right? They have, and you got to talk about winning 6 games in 6 days. How many bad days has Arizona had this season where you're just like, what is this team doing? Or even North Carolina, like, really shouldn't lose that game to NC State. They came up here to Cuse and lost. So, and CT did not pay for this spot right here. Baylor's looking pretty intriguing out of that region. I know I kind of went completely off of the actual question that you asked, but I guess I'll just throw this out here. You have Baylor at the 3. Colgate, this is as bad of a Colgate team as I think they've had in the last half decade. They just happened to be in the tournament because they won the Patriot League, which was down from what it's been in past years. Last year, Colgate was a 15 seed with a much better team. This year, they're a 14. I kind of think Baylor probably walks over them, and then they're going to have the winner of Clemson, New Mexico. I think I saw Baylor at 8-1. Like, I don't know that Baylor underachieved by any means, but there was a lot of people that had them in the top 10. So maybe they did underachieve relative to like what people thought they would be this year. I wouldn't count them out. Offensive efficiency is fantastic. Like they can get hot and beat just about anyone. The defense is better than it was last year. Last year they were dead last in the Big 12 in defensive efficiency. I do think that will be their undoing if they end up getting knocked out of this tournament. But they're a team that kind of intrigues me just because I think they might not really be challenged much until the final the Sweet 16. Again, those are just some thoughts I had there, but I'll kick it over to Drew to see if he has anything to add or a different way to look at it.
Sure.
Drew, who are you looking at?
Yeah.
Who's got it?
Joe, I was just gonna kind of piggyback on that little subsector of the region. It's the 6 seed Clemson and 11 New Mexico, and then 3 Baylor, 14 Colgate, and then down the list it goes Dayton, Nevada in the 7-10, Arizona and Long Beach State, the beach there. How about it correlates with what Trig is talking about? Arizona's been as up and down as anybody. Clemson at times has done the same. If you're looking for kind of, you want that double-digit seed that makes the second weekend type deal, how about the Lobos in Patino, New Mexico? They're on a run right now, going through the Mountain West, winning that tournament against solid teams. Either way you want to look at the Mountain West, did they get too many teams? They were a deep league, and we just saw the Lobos run through it. How about an 11 seed New Mexico making it to the Sweet 16, if not any further? If you're looking for kind of, roll the dice a little bit, obviously, you're going to get a huge plus price on it. I don't hate that bet, Joe, and it kind of correlates with what Trig's talking about.
Yeah, well, I would also I'd throw Oregon in this conversation as well, too, as a team that they had to deal with injuries early. They got the coach, and they're playing their best basketball now and coming in as an 11 seed against a 6 seed in South Carolina. I would not sleep with that Dante kid who's going to be in the NBA next year without a doubt. The kid's an absolute wrecker. But there's a few spots on this here, Trig, where you look at some of these teams and you go, I thought they'd be better during the regular season. They weren't, but it's never too late to be what you could have been here in this tournament.
I just wanted to throw in, like Drew kind of pointed out, New Mexico. This is what I'm saying, where it's like, yeah, I made a blanket statement about the Mountain West, but I actually had New Mexico power rated 1 in that league almost all year. Kind of like kicking myself for not playing him in the final or like finding like better spots to bet them, because again, like I don't think there's a ton separating the teams that are in. Like Utah State is kind of like, they were the team that like finished first and stuff like that. In my opinion, there's almost nothing separating them from like a New Mexico. And I personally have New Mexico rated higher. So I don't hate that. Like, I don't know if they'll get by Clemson, but like the thought process of like what Drew's saying and like the price attached to it, I certainly don't think that that's like a bad look, because again, I just said, okay, well maybe Baylor like hangs around. Well, I use Baylor as the example, but I mean, really any of those teams are capable of beating Baylor. And that's why brackets are tough, right? Because it's all matchup. Like all these things are like matchup dependent. And so that's kind of why I prefer to look at like, just finding a team and then taking them, like betting them to make the Sweet 16 or betting them to win the region or playing a future, because it takes, then you don't have to project out like, okay, this is, like with a bracket, like, well, if this team gets here and this team gets here, then like, I think this is going to happen. I prefer to look at it kind of like that. And again, I wouldn't really talk Drew off of that, because like I see merit to the thought process there.
Yeah. Well, you got, you mentioned Utah State. TCU is a team that I think they beat 4 teams in the top 15. I mean, TCU will certainly be an interesting team to keep an eye on. Utah State, I don't think they played anybody in another major conference all year outside of the Mountain West. So Drew, some of the experience, the coaching as we head into these matchups, It matters, man. Resume certainly matters. And I think some of these matchups, at least early on, you got to consider competition. You got to consider who the coach is. And you also, Drew, got to consider where they're playing, too, which is another interesting aspect of putting it all together.
Absolutely, Joe. I totally agree with you. And I guess I can just point out the fact, coaching does matter a lot. You got to win 6 games in a row. And guys, keep in mind, first round, also Sweet 16, and then Final Four, you get that extra preparation time. I put more emphasis on a coaching advantage in those rounds rather than the round of 32 or the Elite Eight, because then it's just one day off and kind of roll the ball out there again. It's not as much preparation time for those rounds in comparison to round one, the Sweet 16. So that was a great point, Joe. And to your Oregon, South Carolina, what you were talking about there, looking towards the Ducks, I mean, in my opinion, we get a coaching advantage with Oregon in round one with Dana Altman. Plus the fact you brought up Oregon, kind of banged up, playing a lot better basketball down the stretch, winning the Conference of Champions, the last Conference of Champions, at least as we know it, tournament winner here in the Ducks. And they're up against South Carolina with Joe. I mean, as you know, the Gamecocks, they played their best basketball in the beginning of the season. They started off hot and they kind of, they almost overperformed. And against the better SEC teams towards the end of the season, they really got routed by some of them. So I actually I really like your Oregon look there.
Yeah, again, it's just a matter of perception, right? I mean, some teams, and Trig, you had, you mentioned you've got some future tickets here, but you've had them for a while now. I know one of them, out of sight, out of mind. Do people remember how good St. Mary's was down the stretch? They weren't great early, Trig, right? But, I mean, that was a team you were high on. All of a sudden, a month into the season, we're like, oh, God, this is not a good St. Mary's team. And then they've gotten better as the season has gone on. So what were some of the other future tickets you're holding here with some teams?
Yeah, it's funny because I played St. Mary's at the beginning of the season, got 70-1, thought I was a genius for doing that. Probably could have got upwards of 100-1 at some point in like late November, early December. And now you can basically get the same price on St. Mary's that I got at the beginning of the season with the bracket announced. I think they're about 70-1. So I'll just read off what I played and at the point of the season, like where I played it, and if I would still get involved. So I have some UConn at like 8-1. I wish I had way more. Like this is and this is where I might use Kelly's strategy of like, try to like just like do a rollover of sorts rather than like take plus 375 on UConn, which I don't think is good value. I truly believe that they're the best team and they're the team that I would most like want to be involved with from the top teams. So I'm not going to come and play UConn at what I consider to be a bad number, but I will find a way to get more chips in the pot with UConn at some point. Like whether it be let them get to the Sweet 16 and then maybe play them at like whatever their odds are in the Sweet 16, or do like the rollover where I just, play the money line all the way through. So I definitely want more on UConn. I just feel like they're the best team. Tennessee, I have a good number on from a couple of different points in the year, all mid 20-1. A couple weeks ago, I said I wouldn't add more in Tennessee. I don't like where this team's going, the way this team's trending. But Joe, this is one of the scenarios where the draw has got me buying back in on Tennessee because I truly feel like they're, you look at that bottom quadrant of that bracket. I'm not really that scared of Texas. Yeah, I mean, theoretically, could they get nipped by like a Virginia or Colorado State? Of course, but like, Creighton or Oregon, like I think those are all pretty favorable matchups. So even though Tennessee wasn't trending the way I wanted them to, I'm a little bit more optimistic about now. I think I played him at like 25-1 and 23-1, and even at like 18 or 20-1, I think that's a pretty good bet. Marquette, before the season, played them. They're almost the same price now. I actually kind of still like that, assuming Kolek is back and healthy. I have 25-1, I think, and I think you can get 20-1 today. Maybe like chop that around. You can probably get whatever. Michigan State, I mean, if you want to take a shot at 100-1, I think I'm stuck with a bad number there at 50-1. And St. John's, Joe, is not in the tournament. That is a little bit heartbreaking to me. When I played that a few weeks ago in the like 100 to 50-1 range, I thought for sure that they'd be one of these like last four in teams playing in that 11 seed game, and they unfortunately were not. So that one's a coaster. Now that one is dead. But yeah, and then of course St. Mary's we already talked about. Again, they're a matchup nightmare. If they get the right matchups going along, they could make a run. I still think had they gotten by UConn in Albany last year in the round of 32, that they very well have ended up in UConn's spot in the Final Four. So, not a bad team to take a flyer with because Randy Bennett's a great coach. And again, it's all matchups. They could get beat by Grand Canyon. If they get by Grand Canyon, they might be a tough matchup for anyone that, they draw the rest of the way. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. And you know what? I think I'll have to consult CT on this. I think if I was going to add one right now, I might throw something on Baylor. Their offense is good enough where if they get hot, they're going to be a tough out. And I don't mind their region having to play against UNC or Arizona. So maybe Baylor will be an ad for me.
It's interesting, Drew. I had heard it last night that every national champion has been either a number 1 through a number 8 seed, except for one spot, has never won a national championship, and that's coming out of a 5 seed. A 5 seed has never won a national championship. Every other seed 1 through 8 has, right? San Diego State, St. Mary's, the Zags, Wisconsin, all 5 seeds coming into this here. I kind of feel like the Zags are being forgotten about here a little bit. The only team they can't seem to beat is St. Mary's, but, maybe they won't have to play him here at some point, Drew. There are some teams flying under the radar. Give us a name of on some of these teams that you're keeping an eye on moving forward to win the whole damn thing.
To win the whole thing? Going a little bit off the radar. I guess if I went, pretty far off the radar, Texas A&M, the Aggies, it was a team I lost on in the first round last year. However, what do you want in March? You want a team playing good basketball. Texas A&M came on late, kind of the same profile that you talked about with Oregon. A little bit beat up. They're healthy now. They're well coached, and they got 2 of the best guards in the country. And Tyrese Radford, he's likely going to be playing in the NBA. And Taylor there, their point guard, he's one of those point guards, Joe. We've talked about it on the college basketball show. When you kind of get that profile of offense where everybody just spreads out and your point guard's quicker than any of the opponent's defenders, that's usually a good recipe to score some points, kick it out for threes. So I would watch out for the Aggies. If you're looking to kind of go off the radar, again, roll the dice on a team to make a run that's not one of the top seeds, I would go with the Aggies. You bring up Gonzaga. How about that first round matchup against McNeese State and Will Wade, the former LSU head coach? He finds himself. Yeah. He had some off the court issues, I guess we could call it, but he finds himself back in the NCAA tournament. So I feel like they have kind of a tough matchup round 1. And then if they make it through, it would be Kansas in the round of 32. Trig was talking about St. Mary's, at the 5 seed, Joe, up against Grand Canyon. Could you imagine a St. Mary's versus Alabama round of 32 in round 2? I mean, one team going as fast as they possibly can up against St. Mary's going slow, playing defense. That's going to be a heck of a handicap, whoever controls the pace.
Listen, you're going to give Trig a heart attack if you're talking about St. Mary's getting through the 32. And he's going to wonder why he didn't get more on St. Mary's. Oh, my goodness. But the path is there, though. I mean, to your point, Drew, styles make fights, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it would be a correlated game as well. Like, if you like Alabama, might as well parlay with the over. If you like St. Mary's, that's going to be definitely correlated with the under. I mean, just great matchups going up and down. A lot of people wanting to kind of hate on college basketball now this year. The star power might not be there. But I just go up and down, Joe. All of these. I mean, going back to the East, Auburn at the 4, San Diego State at the 5 there against UAB, the Blazers, and the run they just went through to make the tournament. I mean, that whole subsector is great. We get FAU at the 8 versus Northwestern, Big Ten team, 8-9 game. UConn at the one playing Stetson, not far from you, Joe. The Hatters, they went on a run to make it here in the A-Sun, knocking off Austin P in a game I actually lost on. And I was watching Stetson going, man, I got this team circled as bet on, and they're catching huge points against UConn. I mean, a 116 usually doesn't catch a lot of people's attention, but to tell you the truth, I agree with what Trig's talking about, and UConn being the best team out there, but I almost feel like as a 16, Stetson got kind of a slap in the face as the 16 seed. I think they're a little bit better than a lot of people realize.
Man, Hatters, you got to love it. All right, we got games coming up this week. Play in, obviously, in a day here or so. We still got to get a couple more teams in there. That's coming up. Both Drew and Trig will, of course, at their page at WagerTalk.com. The plays are coming. They will be locked in. Now would be a good time for you guys to head over to their pages at WagerTalk.com and get ready to partner up with both of them. And listen, I don't want to say anything here, Trig, but good Lord, guys, have you seen the lineup for the NIT? This might be actually one of the this might actually be very worth watching some of these matchups. Seton Hall is in there. Villanova, I think, was the one seed. Trig Cornell's in there, opening up against Ohio State. I mean, I always found
Joe,
this tournament to be the forgotten one, and some opportunities to actually get some pretty good numbers here.
I want to comment on the NIT quick because, the thing that in the past has always been challenging about the NIT these first couple rounds is trying to gauge if a team wanted to be there or not. That's always been the really challenging part of the NIT, Tuesday and Wednesday. How much does this team want to be there? Well, I think all these teams want to be there now because if they don't, they just don't show up. They just do what Syracuse, the teams that didn't want to go or the coaching staff didn't want to go, like, or whatever, they're just not going. So I don't think you're going to have that this year. I think I don't think these teams are in it. If they went into their locker room and said, like, that the coach probably threw it out there and said, do we want to go play in this tournament? Like, I think most of these teams are going to care. It just doesn't. It's like it would feel weird at this point because none of them are mandated to be there. There's no automatic one seeds there, so it just feels like odd that like any of these teams wouldn't care. You know what I mean? Like whereas in years past, you've had the scenario where the bubble teams like the Pitt, the Oklahoma that didn't make it, they just said the hell with it. We're done. We're not going to continue playing. They didn't go to the NIT and then just like show up, go through the motions and get beat. So I actually think it may be even, a little bit easier. I don't know if I want to say easier, but the handicap might be a little bit more true, if you will, in this year's field, because I'm pretty sure those teams want to be there. I know a team like Cornell wants to be there. That's a huge accomplishment for them, especially in a year where, there's three teams in the Ivy, either in the NCAA tournament or the NIT. Like, it should be great. Like I'm looking forward to all these lesser tournaments, but I actually think the NIT is going to be a very good basketball tournament this year.
And I think you're right, because the teams that considered to be, odd man out or might felt like they got screwed, they're not here. The Oklahomas, the St. John's, they're not in here, right? The teams that are in here are going to be fantastic. You don't think South Florida, Drew, is going to have a chip on their shoulder? You don't think they're going to want to come out there? VCU, who was so close. There are going to be some teams, Indiana State, that are going to want to prove their worth. And I think for a first time in a long time since I can remember, the NIT could very well be some battles and some fun to get involved in that too as well. Now, Drew, before we get out of here, you had mentioned plays are coming here, likely maybe even one coming up in the play-in tournament here. Tell the folks about it.
Sure, Joe. We got the March Madness Bonanza going up. So you get all the plays, NIT, CBI, CIT, and of course the NCAA tournament. I'm going after all of them, guys. I can't wait for this. Just been researching all day long, Joe. Yeah, going to be out with the first round of plays, if you will, by the end of the day. They'll be up on my page, DrewMartinWagerTalk.com. So yeah, go check it out, guys. We'll be in with the first four, and also you're talking about the NIT here, Joe. That starts Tuesday and Wednesday, guys. We don't have to wait very long. It's tipping off tomorrow. And I totally agree with you, Joe. I cannot wait for the NIT, which in a lot of respects out there, guys, if you've been betting on sports this time of year, sometimes these lesser tournaments have actually been a better bet. You can kind of get a little bit of an advantage. And I also agree with Trig. I think a lot of these teams want to be here. And some of these teams, you go down the list. I agree with them on Cornell, but even some of the bigger conference teams like the Georgia Bulldogs, yeah, their record isn't very good. They're just over 500, but against Florida, who's in the tournament, they gave them all they could handle. They played LSU right down to the brink. So watch out for the Georgia Bulldogs and Mike White coach teams. So overall, some great matchups in the NIT. Can't wait for this one. North Texas, the Mean Green, and LSU. Man, there is some good handicapping going on in the NIT. I can't wait for it, Joe.
Yeah, and I mean, I love it because the teams like North Carolina, I think, did this when they missed the tournament, right? They were like the preseason number one, and then they were like, yeah, no, we're good. We're out. We're done. We're like, we don't want to play anymore. So the teams that didn't want to be here don't want to be here. The ones that do. And by the way, first round begins tomorrow in the NIT. So now would be a good chance. And Trig, when are you going to start rolling out the best bets on your page, you think?
So, Joe, I am the $2 handicapper tomorrow here. So this is a play that's already up, but in a couple hours, it'll be up for $2. It's loaded for all access clients. So if you want it now, there's some really good specials. I know every handicapper that's doing college basketball has the March Madness special that goes through the end of the tournament. I will be playing all four tournaments. I actually think that there's typically, more value and better spots in the lesser tournaments, the NIT, the CBI, and the CIT, all of which are back for this. Well, the CBI was back last year, but we have the CIT back as well. It's going to be I believe it's a 16-team tournament where they're going to do 4 pods, and then the winners of each 4 pod that's going to have a host school are going to meet. So that should be a pretty interesting tournament as well. And then, of course, the NCAA tournament had a great tournament last year, and kind of a plan to approach it the same way again this year, and hopefully we'll get the same results. But the play that's going up for $2 will be a 5% play. Believe I'm 13-3 on those in the last 16 college basketball ones. So those have been awesome. Most recently, last Friday, St. John's 5% winner against the number against UConn. That'll be up probably in a couple hours, and the 5%er will be $2. It's a first round NCAA tournament game.
Yeah, guys, no reason not to go visit Trig and Drew right now over on their pages at WagerTalk.com. As you can tell, just because the regular season conference tournament's over, we're just getting started. They call it madness for a reason, and you guys absolutely going to want to head over there, partner up with them for the remainder, right through the national championship here, guys. Hop on board with Trig and Drew, two of the best when it comes to college hoops over at WagerTalk.com. We will begin tomorrow diving into some of these round one matchups here across the board. We'll do that all week long here, getting you ready for the madness, and it is almost upon us. And on behalf of Drew and Trig, we certainly appreciate the time. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and make plans to come back and join us again tomorrow. Right now here as we are ready for March Madness, and we've got you covered here on the College Basketball Tip-Off Show. Until then, head over to WagerTalk.com, visit Drew and visit Trig, and we'll see you again tomorrow.